We're going to get started. My name is Courtney Darby. I'm one of the co-chairs of Darien CPAC, and this is our 5th year of hosting colleges with support services. And I want to start off by thanking our moderator and our wonderful group of college experts. I would also like to thank our event sponsors, Darien Library and Darien High School Parents Association. We have over 160 people registered for today, including students, parents, educators, and administrators, and we are thrilled that you are joining us. The college process can definitely be a little daunting and stressful, but please know you are doing a great thing by getting informed. We will be recording the event today, and we will be distributing that recording through the CPAC eBlast. And we will also be, with that blast, we'll be sending out contact information because our panel has graciously offered to allow you to contact them following this event. So if you don't get our blast, please, we will be sending that link in the chat. And it's actually the Q&A feature. So that is also the feature that we'll be using to do questions. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass the presentation now over to our moderator, Meghan Emanuelson, who's the Director of Guidance for Darien Public Schools. Thank you, Meghan.
Thank you, Courtney, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I would echo Courtney's thank yous to our panelists who are giving of their evening time to share their expertise with us. They really have a lens that not many of us do, and so we are so grateful that they're here with us this evening to answer your questions and to share their insights. I would also like to thank CPAC and the DHSPA Darien Library. This is really, it's one of my favorite events every year. I'm so grateful to continue to be asked back to be a part of it. Thank you to the families for joining us. We know that you're going to find it a wonderfully informative evening. I would be remiss if I did not give a shout out and a thank you to the staff and the faculty and the school counselors at Darien High School who are working so hard on behalf of kids and families, especially under these circumstances, and will continue to do so as your children and your families go through this process. So a little bit about the format for this evening. We're going to ask each of our representatives to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about their role, about their school, and about their programs. We have some prepared questions that cover a variety of topics. And then we're going to leave plenty of time for Q&A. So if you have a question that isn't answered during the course of the presentation, feel free to direct it to the panelists in the Q&A, and we will get to as many questions as we can in the time that we have. If there are questions that are unanswered, you are always welcome to reach out to the school counselors. And I believe that most of our panelists are more than happy to take your questions directly as well going forward. So I would like to introduce our esteemed panel. We have Lyndsay Malcomb, who's the Senior Associate Director of Admissions and the Mid-Atlantic Regional Counselor at St. Lawrence University. Kathy Radziunas from Sacred Heart University, the Director of Office of Student Accessibility. Karen Toole, who's the Coordinator for Academic Support OnTrack at SU and Tutoring at Syracuse University. Erin Leuthold from Rutgers University. She's the Director of Office of Disability Services. And Liz McNamara, who is the Associate Director of the Moses Center for Student Accessibility at New York University. So once again, thank you so much for being here. Lyndsay, can I start with you and ask you to tell us a little bit about St. Lawrence?
Absolutely. Thanks, Meghan, and thanks for including St. Lawrence University tonight in your program. I'm coming at this from an admissions perspective, so I'll try to keep my comments about the university a little bit tighter than normal. St. Lawrence University is located in Canton, New York. We're about 6 hours north of Darien High School. We're in a quaint college town, and we're lucky to have 1,000 acres of land. We're really unique in that we really rely on our location for the college experience. We are 99% residential. All students can have cars on campus. We're the oldest coeducational institution in New York State. And we have a really flexible academic experience for our students. 35% of our students are from New York State, but we've got 60 foreign countries and 42 states represented. So we feel we're a pretty diverse institution for being as small as we are. Academically, highly flexible, meaning students have lots of options It's okay if you come into our experience undecided. In fact, we prefer that. So you can take the time to figure out what it is that you're most passionate about. We have 69 majors, 41 minors. And what I think is most important is to focus in on our class size, which is really small. We have about 16 students in our average class size, and the student faculty ratio is 11:1. As you work into your upper level courses, those class sizes are only going to get smaller and smaller, giving you more access to faculty, to TAs, and it's a peer-to-peer learning experience, meaning there's lots of discussion, style classrooms. Our most popular programs are economics, business, psychology, and biology, so pretty diverse curriculum. And we have a really cool hallmark kind of program that I want to describe to you. It's called the First Year Program. And this is the oldest living and learning program in the country. And it's designed to ensure that students acclimate to life in and outside of the classroom with support and a sense of community. So you'll come in as a first year and you'll automatically be assigned to a roommate that you also take a class with. And the academic advisors that you'll be working with for your classes also teach that class to you. So they'll get to know you not only as a student, but also as a person. Are you an athlete? Are you into the arts? Are you interested in esports? And they really work with you to take your high school education experience and elevate it to the college level. And so that's a really important program in terms of support that we have in the very first year. Some things I want to mention about campus life, like I said, we're highly residential, so you'll have housing for all 4 years. You can have a car for all 4 years. Research is available to students right in your very first year. Study abroad is available to students in your very first year. And currently, according to the Princeton Review, we're ranked 4th in the nation for our alumni network in career services, meaning you're going to have a really iterative support process in terms of your placement either in graduate school or in the workforce immediately after you graduate. 95% of our students are placed 6 months after they graduate. So that's a little bit about some of our hallmark programs, what you can expect from an experience at St. Lawrence. So I'll switch it back over to Meghan.
Thank you, Lyndsay. Kathy?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I am not an admissions coordinator, and I've only been working at Sacred Heart for a couple months, so there's no way I can give you all the information that Lyndsay gave you so well. I am the new director of the Office of Student Accessibility. So I'm going to talk mostly about the transition from high school and your accommodations and what they might look like and be like in a university like Sacred Heart. We have a unique outlook on students getting their accommodations in that I'm part of an umbrella program that's called the Student Success Center. So in addition to me, they'll help you get your accommodations in place, make sure that they're being facilitated appropriately. And that's an ongoing conversation. The changes can change throughout the year, or what you need when you're a freshman, you might not need when you're a senior, and we can work on that. But I'm also part of a program that is for any student. So people are coming in and out of the building all the time. The student success coordinators fall under that too. So they help students, especially the first year, transitioning away from the support you might have had in high school to what you have in college. It shouldn't look that different, but if it does, the success coordinators can help you. Organization, you know, all those executive functioning skills that everybody's always talking about is a big thing that a lot of our coordinators spend time on with the students. We are, well, I guess we're a relatively big school. We have 5,000 undergrad students, and we have almost 800 students that have disabilities and take advantage of having accommodations. And our professors, I have to say that the reason I wanted to work at Sacred Heart is because the staff there, the door is always open. So our professors work very hard to make sure the accommodations are implemented and that everybody is comfortable with them. I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Karen?
Hello, everyone. So glad you could join us tonight. As Megan mentioned, my name is Toole with Syracuse University. I'm the academic coordinator for the Center for Disability Resources. So similar to Kathy, that's kind of more where I'm oriented. So I will not be doing as great of a job as Lyndsay talking about the whole university, but probably will be able to answer questions if you have any. So our Center for Disability Resources works with students to access their accommodations. We have about 13 access counselors. You'll be assigned one for the entire 4 years. Within our center, we have a testing center. We have a note taker coordinator. We have smart pens. We have peer note takers. We also have an accessibility department for those people that need accessible reading, e-readers. We convert textbooks to e-reading to help with students with that. And then my area is academic support. So within that, we have some tutoring. We have learning strategists that work one-on-one with students, as Kathy mentioned, executive functioning, time management, organizational skills. That's for any student registered with our office. We see a lot of freshmen, sophomore gaining those skills. Not to say that everything's going great your junior year and you need to come back, you're taking harder courses, you can still meet with those learning strategists. And one of the major things we do as well is we help students connect with the various campus resources. For example, we have a writing center. We have the the Center for Learning and Student Success, which has hundreds of tutors. Those are typically peer tutors, juniors and seniors. We help them connect with the tutors that they might need. We have math clinics, physics clinics. We work with students to build self-advocacy skills. Going in to see a professor that first time in office hours sometimes can be a little daunting. So we'll work with communication skills. So that's part of what we do in academic support. Our other area that's brand new is our OnTrack at SU program. We're in our second year. That's a fee-based program, and it involves working with a trained ADHD coach, twice a week appointments. There's touch points within that. And that's really designed for the first year student, and it's holistic in nature. So it's not just academics, as I mentioned. Everything I mentioned is included in that, but we're talking about really managing your life on your own, the social piece, the emotional piece, making connections. Syracuse is great for their clubs and organizations. There's over 400 clubs in about every area of interest you can think of. So we help students connect with that. Roommates, sometimes there's issues there, working through that. So it's really about that transition. So that's a little bit about the Center for Disability Resources and what I do. As a whole, Syracuse University, it's a large campus. There's about 22,000 enrolled students. That includes graduate students. There's 13 different colleges within Syracuse. And similar to, I think it was Lyndsay was saying about, not having to declare a major right off the bat. We're always a fan of that. I myself changed my major like 3 times, and I graduated in something very different from what I'm doing now, which I love my job now. So figuring college out and what interests you is part of the fun. So we'll help connect you to academic advisors if you're exploring careers, who to talk to. One of my favorite parts of Syracuse, as I have the dome behind me, is the dome life and the sports and the school spirit is great. Hopefully we'll be getting back to all that this fall, but the Syracuse Orange did make the March Madness tournament, so we're excited about that. So it is a really fun, diverse campus with a lot of resources. And as Megan was saying, you'll have my contact information. So if you have specific questions, just let me know, reach out. Thank you again.
Thank you, Karen. Erin?
Oh my gosh, I'm like getting chills listening to everybody. This is so exciting. So my name is Erin Leuthold. I work for Rutgers University. So Rutgers is the state university of New Jersey. We literally have 3 main campuses and then a satellite campus at almost every community college there. So, I mean, there is like so many opportunities and all of the different programs, whatever you might be interested in, chances are Rutgers probably has a major. So with there being 3 main campuses, there's Rutgers New Brunswick, which many times when people refer to Rutgers, that's what they're talking about. It's main campus, 40,000 plus students. They're in the Big Ten athletic conference. So that campus is like during normal times, just bustling with activity and life and a very diverse scene. Really great, lots of fun. Rutgers Newark is right outside of New York City, and they have just about a little over 10,000 students maybe. And then there's Rutgers Camden, which is where I am. And we have around 8,000 students. We're the smallest campus, but really all of the campuses there's a lot of great people there. And really the students are also what makes it so wonderful. So my role at Rutgers as the Director of Disability Services, we do lots of different things. I was also a high school teacher in New York before I moved down to this area. So I totally feel like I have a great understanding of both worlds, which high school and now higher ed. I'm also the mom of 4 teenagers, so I'm like living this right along with all of you parents. So yeah, I totally get the difference. When we work with students, it is up to the student to disclose if they want to work with an Office of Disability Services to receive accommodations. My approach is always, let's talk. What's worked well for you in high school, and then what can that look like here in college? I also like to put out there to people, because they don't always think about this. So yes, if you have a 504 or an IEP, sometimes things change when you get to college, though. It's a totally different learning environment. You could have changes in your health. I'm working with a ton of people now who are like, oh my gosh, with all this screen time, I have these migraines. Can you help me with that? So lots of different reasons why it just might be a good idea to reach out. Also, this should be uniform at all of the other schools, but the confidentiality piece, I think, is always really important to talk about. This information that gets shared with disability services is confidential. It's not a part of your educational record. It will not show up on a transcript anywhere. The filing is kept within just the office. So, you know, that's important. If you just wanted to reach out and have a conversation, it's not going to go anywhere. So yes, thank you for inviting me. And I think I answered all the questions.
Thank you, Erin. Mary Liz?
Hi, everybody. Happy. I'm not seeing all your faces, but I'm imagining all your faces out there. So it's nice to almost see you. My name is Mary Liz Mcnamara. I'm the Associate Director of the Moses Center for Student Accessibility at New York University. And I think I'm echoing comments from many of my co-presenters. NYU is a big, sprawling university. We have the main campus in Washington Square. We have another campus, the Tandon School for Engineering in Brooklyn, which is really has gone beyond engineering now, is really a creative hub of NYU. We have 2 standalone campuses, degree granting campuses, one in Shanghai and one in Abu Dhabi. And then we have, I think, 26 global sites right now. So our office works with all of those schools, all the students who register with us for accommodations and modifications based on disability. When I started at NYU, which was in 2008, I think we had 650 students registered with our office, and now it is about over 3,500. So there's been an enormous increase in the amount of students that we serve. That is, for us, a terrific statistic, because it shows that we are reaching a much more diverse student body coming to NYU, and we value that group of students highly. At the Moses Center, we have about 10 accessibility specialists who have caseloads, and we also have a dedicated assistive technology specialist. We also have accommodations administrators who help with the testing accommodations, with note-taking accommodations, with alternate format. Basically, since NYU is such a huge university, we really value the relationship, the one-on-one relationship you have with an accessibility specialist. We feel that that's one of the most important things that leads to success for the students who are registered with our office, is that they work with somebody throughout their degree time at NYU. And I think that relationship is really important in terms of helping individual students find the resources. It's a decentralized university. There's coaching and tutoring in every school. There's also dedicated places for the Writing Center and for the Academic Resource Center. So sometimes it can be confusing simply because there are so many options for students. So we help negotiate and navigate that complex terrain. We also have a program that is for autistic students at NYU. We started it 5 years ago. It's a free and optional program for students who are on the spectrum. It has 3 basic parts. One is one-on-one meetings with an accessibility specialist once a week. The second part are group meetings with the cohort of students. And the third is outreach to the NYU community. So we do discussions and presentations. We, along with the autistic students, for instance, they just made a movie about what the autistic experience is like at NYU, and to use that to help other students and professors understand NYU life from their perspective. So there's a lot of interesting things that are happening for that community. We are also lucky to have Michael John Carley, who is an autistic self-advocate. He's working with us this year at NYU on initiatives for access that go above and beyond just disability-related accommodations. We're looking at how welcoming the university is to students with disabilities, to staff with disabilities, to faculty with disabilities, and trying to make sure that our students who have disabilities are participating globally in all of the programs to the same level as every other student. And again, happy to answer other questions at any point. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mary Liz, for those wonderful introductions to schools. It's all so exciting. It makes me want to go back to school. So I'd like to move into sort of the prepared question part, and I think we'll start at the beginning because that's a very good place to start with admissions and the admissions process. So certainly anybody who wants to jump in and add to some comments, please feel free to do so. But can we just talk a little bit about, oftentimes we'll get questions in the guidance office, like, is there a separate or a different process for somebody who has a 504 or an IEP in terms of admissions? Is their application viewed any differently? And the big question is always, should they even disclose at that stage of the game in terms of that initial application? So if we could just speak to admissions, how the process may or may not differ for students with disabilities, and what your advice would be on disclosure, that would be awesome.
Thanks, Megan. I think this is such an important question, and I think there's a short answer and then there's a longer answer. The short answer is no, you do not have to disclose anything that you're not comfortable with in your application process. When we're reviewing applications from an admissions perspective, the first thing that we assess is, are they academically admissible? Can you do the work at the university? And we do that through lots of different things: test scores, your essay, your teacher recommendation letters, counselor recommendation letters, and then the type of institution that you're at. So we're assessing you within what's available at Darien High School. And if you are an individual or your family is very open and comfortable disclosing, then great, you can do that. There is space on the Common Application or the Coalition app to add additional information. And this year, Common App added a community disruption component, which I think is especially helpful in COVID, addressing lots of different topics. So there's space in the application process to do so, but we don't use that information in any capacity to determine if you can do the work at the university. Our job is to assess if you can do the work academically, and then what we learn about you throughout the process is just an added bonus. And I really like what Erin said, is that this is all confidential. We don't share that information with anybody besides our colleagues in the Accessibility Services Office, if that information is disclosed. And if you enroll at your institution and then you want to disclose the information or get in touch with any of the fabulous counselors, then that's the appropriate time to do that.
I would just, I think that's a terrific answer by Lyndsay. I would just add a little bit. You don't have to disclose, but I think often it is such an interesting and positive part of who you are, that when you're telling the story of who you are, I think you might want to include something about whatever disability issues you are experiencing it. I mean, I see it as, you know, disability is often an asset for people. They have, their experiences are such that they are stronger students and stronger community members and stronger applicants because of it. So, I mean, I'm not saying you have to, but consider it and think of it. It's often a highlight and something that makes you stand out.
Thank you. I love that. And we'll get into a little bit more of like what kinds of typical accommodations or more common accommodations. But the next thing that comes up after, yay, they've been admitted, is sort of what that process looks like to actually access those supports or those accommodations. So our counselors, just for our families, our counselors will meet and do a little research with the students in terms of, you know, most of your websites are very detailed in terms of what's required. And most of that's available, you know, very publicly on the website. But in general, can you speak to a little bit of like what kinds of documentation is expected, how recent that documentation should be, what families should be gathering, you know, as they're maybe in their last few months of high school in preparation to seek those supports?
So I'll start, if that's okay. The documentation really is important. And I know a lot of high school students have their triannual report where they have evaluations and everything. We go back as far as 5 years. We don't take anything older than that because your brain changes and the tools you learn to use change. So that's why it's good to have relatively recent evaluations. What we need is for a clinical specialist to say what your disability is, because that will meet the American with Disability Act criteria, and how they evaluated that, how they came up with that decision. And then a lot of times they will include information on what kind of accommodations will work for you. Part of the transition from high school to college is that maybe you had a math issue and you were reduced the amount of problems you had to do. Well, in college, that would look different in that you might have tutoring, or you might have the use of a calculator for certain specific things. And a lot of times the clinical specialist can help delineate what's going to be best for you. So that becomes part of the conversation. Once we have that documentation, what I consider to be the most important part is we sit down with you and meet with you, and you talk about what's worked for you, what you've already tried and you know doesn't work. We use our experience and our expertise to try to come up with new and sometimes very clever accommodations that aren't always the typical, excuse me, an e-reader or something like that. Sometimes it's a matter of getting very creative to what's going to help a student out, and that is the most important part, is the conversation with the student and the information that they provide.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We, you know, one of the most important parts at Syracuse is the student experience, and so We do ask for documentation as well. We have gone back, further than 5 years, depending on the student's situation, but, IEP, 504, neuropsych eval, all of those are fine. But similar to what Kathy was saying, it's really about listening to the student, what's worked well in the past, what hasn't worked well, what they've tried, talking about the various accommodations that we offer at our center, and then matching them up. That's when, depending on the student, they'll connect, the access counselor will connect them to my office and academic support and work through there. And so typically students now for fall 2021 can register with our office and get started. And then in the summer, they'll meet their access counselor, do the virtual piece just to get that accommodation letter in place and know they have it. And then once they get on campus, hopefully this fall, like in fall in the past, we'll want to meet with them in person just to get to know them, make sure they know where the office is, see their counselor. And we really want them to get used to coming in whenever they need to get support. Yeah.
I was going to chime in too, that yes, all of this information, what's nice is that we're all kind of governed by the same laws. So a lot of this is very similar. It just is probably going to look different depending on the nature of the institution where you decide to go. At Rutgers, yes, hopefully, you can get these evaluations and updated documentation while you're at high school. If not, Rutgers at each of their campuses does have psychiatrists who do these educational evaluations. And sometimes, let's say you had an evaluation when you were in 9th or 10th grade, so, it's not going to happen again while you're a student. Let's say you are studying a program that has a licensure or certification exam at the end of your program. You're going to need to get something updated because those, like nursing, teaching, any of these professions where you have these exams that are state exams, you're going to need to have a full, the full documentation at that point. So it's really great that Rutgers has the ability to do the evaluations while you're a student right on campus. I was also going to say, so a few of us have mentioned letters of accommodation. So students, you're probably familiar with your IEP, your 504 plan. I'm sure you have a case manager person at the school who disseminates that information on your behalf to all of your teachers. And it has a lot of information if you've ever taken a look. It's got your diagnosis and lots of information about you. College is really, really different. So again, coming back to that confidentiality piece, you are in control of who knows and how much they know. So those letters of accommodation, at Rutgers, it's literally a 1, maybe 2-page document that just goes to the professor, you give to the professor, and it will have, so-and-so is working with the Office of Disability Services. These are their approved accommodations, a little bit of language about the laws that protect individuals with disabilities. And then they can reach out to the coordinator or if they have questions. So sometimes students are like, wait, I do that? I give that to my professor? So at Rutgers, we do, we really, especially with our first year students, have a lot of conversation about what does this look like? You print the letter out, give it to your professor, or do you email it to them? Do you have a conversation? What are you comfortable sharing? And then usually by the time they're seniors, they're like, yep, got this. I know what I'm doing. So yes, just a couple things. Oh, and I also like to mention to students, this is a work in progress. Things change over time. What you may be doing in high school is working great. And then you come to college and you're like, whoa, my strategies aren't working for me anymore. What's happening? So you can always come back anytime and we can make updates to accommodations. So yes, just wanted to jump in with that.
I agree with a lot of things that have been said, and we have similar protocols in place at NYU. The other thing I would also say in terms of an evaluation is it depends on not just how many years ago was it done, but how old you were at the time that it was done. If an evaluation was done when somebody was 17 and now it's 10 years later and they're going to law school, that would probably still be a fairly valid evaluation, but we would have to look at it. So we can't say without reading it, we'd have to look into it. The kind of important thing is the case-by-case evaluation of the documentation. So that we're always looking at what's the history of accommodation and what's the history of evaluation. So we're looking at both things to try to figure out from that perspective what works for you. But as everyone has been saying, the most important piece is the conversation with the student, and that is ongoing, and accommodations can change. And the other one thing, and I think probably we'll get into this later, but this, to add on to what Erin was saying, and I think one of the big differences for students their first year is the understanding that the accommodation letter, whatever form that it takes, ours is kind of automatically given, the student applies through the student portal and it just goes to the professor. But that communication with the professor does not give any information about what the disability issue is. So that's a big change for students. And there's, good things, bad things about it. And some students say, what, you didn't tell the student that, you didn't tell the professor that I had ADHD? And I said, no, we don't give out that information. So that's one thing that you want to really, once you get to college, you want to talk to the disability services, whatever form that takes, and so that you fully understand how your school handles that.
Thank you all for that. I even learned some things in there too, so that was wonderful. And I think, what's coming through loud and clear is that obviously it's all about, the individual student, and that it differs from student to student, as it should, as every student is unique. And I'm hearing that loud and clear. And we often share that the 504, the IEP, doesn't necessarily exactly translate over to a college environment for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's not, specific to your environment or your structures. Sometimes it's no longer developmentally appropriate. I'm certainly hearing things about, getting creative with the accommodations a student needs. And so this might be a little bit tricky to answer, but are there kind of common accommodations that a student might receive? I'm sure extended time, for example, is a fairly common one. Or are there things that just don't happen in a collegiate setting, or just can't happen? Is anything specific about accommodations that we would see in a common way at a university?
I think at Syracuse, like you mentioned, time and a half or double time on exams, that's probably the most common accommodation, reduced distraction. But another one that's fairly popular is bringing a recording device or laptop to class. Some professors can get, don't always want that, but we do allow students with that accommodation to bring it in just to hear the lecture again, to be able to type, if they don't like to write. And we also have, I mentioned, a smart pen, which as they do like to write, it actually records the lecture. So I would say for us, those are the most common popular accommodations. We have obviously quite a few others, but yeah.
We just started using a new, well, it's new to us anyway, it's called Glean. The student can record the lecture. It's amazing. Can record the lecture, and with 5 hotkeys, they can trigger certain parts. I got to remember this. I got to ask a question about this. This is going to be on the test. So when they listen to it, they go right back to those hot spots. They don't have to listen to the whole lecture again. And, we're finding that for students who used to have scribes, that's how we initially started using it. But now a lot of different students, some of our students that have ADD are finding it very helpful. We have some old school technology that still works very well for some people, and they want to keep it, and that's fine. But we're always looking for new stuff. The creative part comes in with some of the disabilities that people have that are not kind of what you would hear a lot about. And we have one student that has a hearing thing. I can't remember the name of it, forgive me, but we had to put her in almost a phone booth so she could take her test and put stickies on the walls so that she wouldn't be able to see people were seeing her. And that just made her comfortable. So her anxiety went down and she was able to focus on the test exam. So that's why the standard stuff that isn't always for everybody, you got to think outside of the box sometimes to make sure that their accommodations are appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Mary, did you want to jump in?
I just wanted to respond to your question about what are the kind of things that usually don't happen at higher ed. And I think they have to do with changing something about the content and some that we don't have that option. And I would say that's generally, there are exceptions where you can go in and work because with a professor, with a program to find another way for the student to learn what they have to learn in that course. But sometimes I'll have students who come in with an IEP that indicates something like additional instructions during testing to say, to explain what a question means or to parse out a certain portion of an essay with them. And that's not generally allowed in a higher education setting. We always say case by case basis because there are always some kind of exceptions, but you have to be able to complete the content of the course in order to get the credit.
Thank you. So many of our students with IEPs have a resource room or what we call a learning center as part of their day, either on a full-time basis or a part-time basis. Is there any structure that kind of mimics that support in a collegiate environment?
So something that people will sometimes come in and request as an accommodation is tutoring. And Rutgers that is not something that is specific to people with disabilities. Tutoring is available to anybody at Rutgers and it's free. So tutoring is a big support, but again, it's the student has to come in and say, I want to sign up for tutoring. There's also at Rutgers, we have what's called learning specialists. So they are not an academic tutor. They're really going to work with students more on executive function skills. So think planning, time management, organization. You can set up like weekly appointments with them for accountability reasons. They are just like an amazing group of people. There's also student success coaches, which work with the first year students. It's an opt-in program. So there's not a like resource room setup, but there are lots of supports that students can, look for. And I think that that's lots of schools offer something along those lines.
And I'm assuming that the accessibility officers that work in your offices would sort of function similar to how our case managers function in terms of guiding the student and helping them to connect with resources and giving advice and helping to keep them on track. So that case manager model, I assume, translates in some way.
Yes, we also make lots of referrals. So something that we'll do is send an email introducing, with the student's permission, send an email to our colleague introducing the student to this person, and then they can reach out and say, oh my gosh, great, let's meet. But yeah, we do a lot of direct referrals that way.
Is there an accommodation around smaller class sizes typically? Have you heard of that in the industry where there are classes that are smaller for students with disabilities?
Not at Syracuse, we don't. They try to work with their academic advisor and understanding what may have a smaller class, but like our Psychology 205, the main psych class, just about every freshman has to take it. It's a large lecture hall and it's kind of, no getting out of that. But we will, that's when we talk about strategies within that area to help the student, yeah.
Most of our classes are between 22 and 25 students. So I don't think that there would be a need, but that wouldn't be an accommodation that would be approved.
And I know some of you spoke about fee-based programs or even specialized programs that don't have a fee attached. If you do have a specialized program, fee or not fee, can you speak to that a little bit? And then also any specific, transition to college, even if they're just first year experiences that are open to, any student.
We do not have any fees affiliated with any of our programs. We start working with our first year students right in July. As soon as we can place them in classes and get them an advisor, they start working with faculty at that time. And that would be an appropriate time for a student to start getting in touch with accessibility services or academic services, which might be more time management or executive functioning, as been described as some other panelists. In terms of the class sizes at St. Lawrence, I just want to mention for some of our pre-professional programs, we have class breakdowns. So the lecture hall might be 100 students, but then the lab will be 25 students. And then we have little components called peer pods, which are working directly with a TA, and that's about 5 to 6 students. So if you coming in and have that fear of being in that larger lecture, you kind of break it down into smaller blocks for pre-law, pre-health, our vet program, our engineering program, and we're going to be starting one for computer science. So not exactly like Erin said under a disability services, but it is, we find comforting to students to have that smaller breakdown for those more intense programs.
We don't charge for our supplemental programs. I guess you would call them supplemental. We have, like I said, our student success coordinators, tutoring in 3 different levels, from professional tutors down to fellow peer tutors. We also have a program where we actively seek out students who are struggling in their first semester. And then the following semester, in the spring semester, we have them take a course that goes over a lot of those study skills, organization skills, and connecting to all of the resources that are available. And that's very popular. We also have a pre-fall program, and that students can select whether they want to go into the business school pre-fall or whatever their major is, or they can come to our office pre-fall. And it just really kind of helps buffer things. We have them write their first paper as part of that program and work in the math with the math professors also, so they kind of get that out of the way. So by the time they have to do it as part of their freshman first year writing seminar, they're well versed in it and ready to go. So it's just a few of them.
Yeah, and our Center for Disability Resources, we have 2 options. One is working with a learning strategist once a week, or every other week, whatever the student prefers, and there's no charge for that, or no fee, and that's only for students registered with the Center for Disability Resources. And then, as I mentioned, we do have a fee-based program, OnTrack at SU, that's more intensive, more holistic, meeting with a trained ADHD coach twice a week with touch points along the way. And then as a whole, the university has strong supports. They have a coaching program within the tutoring center that students can take. There's no fee for that. All freshmen are required to take a 101 class that's really about study strategies, campus resources, although tutoring, it allows them to learn everything that campus has to offer. And then there's no fees for that as well. And then the many types of, math and physics clinics and such. So it kind of depends, but that's one of the things we do, like I said, is help the students kind of find those supports.
I echo the kind of sentiments and ideas of these, large schools. We have a lot of different services that are available, but they're decentralized and often determined school by school. To discuss the class size we have, I'd say our class size ranges from 5 students to 500 students. And even in the large Intro to Chem 101 kind of course, which is a large lecture course, then you have a lab, which is much smaller, and then a recitation, which is much smaller than that. So there is a kind of an array of different course sizes, but I wouldn't say that NYU is just with small class sizes. Although there are schools in NYU that's part of their cachet, the liberal studies program, also the Gallatin School for Independent Study is another school that is focuses on small seminars. So it depends on which school at NYU you're looking at. That's how I would answer that question. In terms of supports, as I said, we have the NYU Connections program for autistic students. There are no other fee-based programs for support. We have the Writing Center, we have the Academic Resource Center. There's tutoring available in every school. And there's also TA tutoring through programs, but there's also peer tutoring through the Academic Resource Center. And that's, one of the reasons why we think it's so important to build relationships. We are very intentional about building relationships with students, those one-on-one relationships with the accessibility specialists, and also the relationships through the NYU Connections program, so that students know who to turn to, that they don't have to feel that nobody is there who has, an understanding of the breadth of the university and can say, let's put you in touch with this person. Let's put you in touch with this person, that they don't feel, especially in this Zoom world where everybody feels so detached, it's essential that they know who to turn to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So sorry, Erin, did you want to jump in?
Oh, I was just going to say yes, all to the yes to everything that people are saying. At Rutgers, we also have an app so that students can see what is happening, because there is so much email going out that can be really overwhelming. So students seem to really like the Rutgers app. And then they can get connected through workshops and opportunities. Just such an active campus life, even in this environment. There's still lots of things happening just remotely right now.
I just want to also jump in, because I think we haven't really, maybe we'll talk about it later, but in terms of support services, I think all the universities have a student health center of some sort, and the counseling services are generally pretty robust. And at NYU, you have 10 free counseling sessions for every student every year, but there are also a number of groups for ADHD, for procrastination, for test anxiety. And those are very helpful for students. They can drop in and participate as needed with those. So there are services beyond what you think of just academic support services. There are a wide range of services, generally at I think all of the places that we're talking about here.
And I'm assuming to any student, even students without IEPs or 504s. But for example, if a student was IEP'd for counseling hours in high school, then I'm assuming that would be part of that conversation that you're having with students to help to connect them if they wanted to continue in some counseling, again, available to all students, but part of your conversation would be to help to connect them. That's wonderful. Thank you. And so switching gears a little bit, and certainly I know everyone's fingers and toes are crossed that we'll be dealing in more normal circumstances in the fall. But if you could just speak a little bit to, were you remote or hybrid, or were your students home? And if you weren't fully in person, what does that look like for students with disabilities in terms of accessing accommodations? If we are in a similar situation in the fall, how might that look for students in terms of access to their accommodations?
I can start with this one. So Rutgers was almost fully remote. There are some programs that you just can't recreate in the virtual. I mean, Rutgers New Brunswick, especially with the science and the labs, those had an in-person component, but there was also students able to live on campus. So but primarily we were remote. We're being told we'll be back in the fall in person, with an option for people to be remote if there is reason that they would need that. So we're just trying to have lots of options. Yeah, so, and accommodations, I mean, we had to do some, again, creative solutions to make sure that everything was accessible. So lots of workarounds with these like lockdown browsers for exam proctoring, and let's say like a screen reading software. Some things were just not compatible, but again, we're really fortunate to have a whole entire assistive technology team. So we've been able to work through those issues. I feel like we're in a pretty good place right now, but we do hope to be back in person very soon.
Similarly, NYU was, for the most part, we were more remote than it appeared, because a lot of the classes which were listed as hybrid ended up being more remote than in person. Certainly during last spring and through the summer, and the fall, we had a little bit more, in person, and now a little bit more. And again, I think the key word or the key phrase for the fall is we don't know yet. So, I keep saying to students, maximum flexibility. That's what I say to professors as well, maximum flexibility. We're here to support students. So I think there are two parts of this in terms of the disability accommodations and access to students to our services. It was, I think, incredibly a terrific transition. In fact, we probably will never go back to all in person, because we see for our students, they need to talk to somebody. They can talk to somebody right now. And in terms of our global reach, in terms of being able to meet with students in Shanghai and Abu Dhabi, we were, kind of well-versed in Zoom at that point now. So we're just thinking of kind of expanding that in terms of, and continuing in terms of access. But for students, we had a lot of difficulties with, I think someone mentioned migraines because of all the screen time, difficulties with attention when you're spending 3 hours looking at a little screen rather than being in an environment where everybody is looking towards the professor. I mean, was for students with attention issues, some mental health issues. It has been an incredibly difficult time. I am amazed by the resourcefulness of the students and the resilience. So I think for you high school students, I hope you're taking a journal, because what you just went through was an amazing experience. And the fact that you're here looking forward to college gives me such hope. And I just feel thrilled by it. So we all went through an unbelievable thing, and that you're ready, looking forward to the fall where things will maybe be opening up is terrific.
I just want to say that I think part of the bonus of having the everybody go online is that the professors started making accommodations just to do their teaching, and are providing supplemental PowerPoints and things like that, and everything is much more available to all students. So it really helps some of our students, and other students, like you said, struggled with the attention deficit area, but we were able to help with that. So I too am very amazed at what our professors were able to put together very quickly and have everybody be successful.
And I do want to make sure that we're able to get to some of our family questions. So I'll make this the last question as part of my part. But I think if our students were to say that the one word they hear probably the most often coming from the adults in our building is maybe the word self-advocacy. And we spend a lot of time talking about, how important it is in high school, and even probably more so in college. And so, and I've heard about the letters that go to professors. If a student is encountering a professor who's perhaps a little less willing to employ an accommodation that's on that letter, like, does that happen? If the student needs help in communicating with professors about their accommodations or their disability and how it manifests and how it impacts them, is that something that your office also provides in terms of the help with that communication?
Yeah, I mean, it's, like you said, we want to work on building self-advocacy skills, right? So same thing, we encourage the student to email or hand deliver the accommodation letter. Again, no disability is disclosed, it's confidential. Ask them if they have questions, etc. On a rare occasion, there'll be a professor. We find it's typically like a brand new professor that maybe doesn't quite understand our office or what it means, and might question the student a little bit, or maybe ask, give them a little bit of not a hard time, but, wondering what's going on. And so we always tell the students beforehand, listen, if there is remotely any issue or you feel uncomfortable or anything, let us know. And that's the case where the access counselor will step in and email the professor directly and just say, just touching base, you know, we have accommodations that are here. Do you have any questions, or is there an issue? And at times, you know, the recording piece, a couple of times, some of the professors says it's their you know, copyright, privacy right, and they don't want that information on the internet it being recorded. And so, or getting the PowerPoints lectures in advance. And so professors can be a little prickly about it. And that's when the access counselor will step in and basically, you know, let the professor know what the situation is as far as saying that they have this accommodation. Otherwise, we're all for the student, you know, doing that self-advocacy. We'll have conversations with them, even role play, you know, explain what it'll look like. And you know, and freshman year, maybe not so much, but certainly by the time they get to junior, senior, they're fine. Yeah.
I also try to encourage students to start a conversation with the professor once the letters have gone out. And I'm clear to tell them that your professor might not know everything about this accommodation, and to go back and forth and have a dialogue, and also to try to connect that student to the professor, because that's your surest way to have success in college, is to meet with your professors and have conversations with them. And that really has worked very well. It also gives a professor some information that it's okay to talk about this accommodation with the Office of Success, Student Success. So
I think for us, sometimes it's as simple as just having a meeting with the student and helping them formulate an email to their professor, you know, or, you know, just to, they need a little bit of help because it's not something that they've done before. It's a different skill. So we, you know, we'll just go, let's meet for 10 minutes and formulate an email together. And then the students are, you know, able to advocate for themselves. You know, but it's you need a little bit of help in the beginning.
Agreed. All right. Thank you all so much. That was fantastic and so appreciated. And I think at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Courtney and Kelly, who I believe have some questions from our families.
Hi there. My name is Kelly DuPont. I don't think I was introduced in the beginning, but I'm going to be asking some of the Q&As. We've got some questions that got sent in ahead of time and they have been answered, but I'm going to go through the Q&A because I know people are on, and there's some really good questions. Forgive me if they're somewhat of a duplicate, but I think it's all good information, and if we repeat just a bit. One of the questions is, we have heard having a neuropsychological exam within the last 3 years of high school is ideal. Would the panel agree that time frame is correct, or should it really be done closer to graduation? Anybody can hop in on that one.
we're fine with 3 years. On a stretch, we have gone out to 5 years, but 3 years is perfect.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay, the next one is, do you prefer that neuropsych evals are done by the public school system or by a private group?
Really no preference. I mean, if it's done by the school, you don't have to pay for it. So
Right.
that's
I agree.
maybe preferable to a family.
Okay. Obviously, GPA is a big factor in determining eligibility for entrance into schools. However, many students with disabilities have struggled to perform at their best during the pandemic, and their GPAs have suffered. How are universities taking this into consideration, or will they at all?
That's a great question, and it's definitely something that we've seen through this admission cycle. Is students have been more on an upward trend, and then the pandemic hit and we see some flatlining or maybe even a dip. And that's where the communication and self-advocacy component that my co-presenters have been talking about becomes really, really important. Explaining the disability that you might have, the challenges that you faced, whether it's with school or your family. We've seen an incredible increase in students that have family responsibilities now, taking care of siblings, or maybe they live in a multi-generation home, or their parents are working more now, And so they have to be transportation for siblings. All of these things matter. And we can't know what we don't know in the admissions process. So the more information that you can provide, whether it's related to your disability or just the circumstances that you have found yourself in, that is going to help. I would say too, a lot of colleges now are opening up opportunities for students to voice more of their experience. So that might be in an interview, either an informative interview or an evaluative one. There's often a Q&A component, or just drop-in hours. We've added that this year, and that's been amazing. 15 minutes to just connect one-on-one, hear a little bit about how you're doing or what's going on in your life. Take advantage of those opportunities because they'll help you throughout the process.
Okay, this kind of goes along this same question with the neuropsych. Is it necessary to have the updated neuropsych? We've kind of gone and answered that one. So I guess we'll move to the next one. Is there an additional, so this was also answered, but maybe we can go through some of this. I know some of the schools have cost associated. Is there an additional cost associated with the use of the Office of Accommodations? Right? Just want to cover that one. Okay.
You do not pay for accommodations.
Right. Okay. Just making sure we're covering all these. The next question was, are the tutors peer tutors or certified tutors and coaches at any of your programs?
We have both. So
you have both.
It's
okay.
Yeah.
We also hire a tutoring service that's available for every class, because you can't have someone ready to tutor in every type of biology or computer science, whatever. So you have a certain number of hours for a professional tutor, and they might be in Hawaii, who knows, but they're accessible online. In addition to the other 3 tiers, the peer tutors, or our faculty also volunteer to be tutors too.
So this question has come up a couple times here is, how do your schools view the lack of foreign language in high school?
Do you mean if a student, because I know sometimes students will come in and request like a course substitution for
right.
world language. So it really depends on where that's coming from. So sometimes students come in and make that accommodation request and it's linked to a disability. Sometimes students come in and say, I didn't have to take a world language in high school. And when we look back at the documentation, it's usually not related to the disability. It's because they didn't have room in their schedule. So Mary Liz has said it beautifully many times. It's really a case-by-case basis about why the student didn't take the language. And then we would just work with them to figure out, what we're going to do.
Okay. And for clarification for the families, because we're in a little bit of an in-between here, we're working under 2 different course catalogs for the state of Connecticut. So our current juniors and seniors were not required to take a world language in order to graduate. And our current freshmen and sophomores are required to take 1 year of a world language before they graduate. And so certainly, and if the families have additional questions about that, they're welcome to reach out to their school counselor as well.
Okay, great. Another question was, how do your universities accommodate students with food allergies? Food allergies are considered a disability in Connecticut. I know not all of your schools are in Connecticut, but.
That's a great question. I think someone said it earlier. There's a lot of types of accommodations. I think a lot of schools here will say that they have nutritionists on staff that help with these types of things. I know that we do, and we have great labels and indicators in all of our dining halls. But I think it's helpful to think about academic services and other types of services that we offer, food being one of them, but I can also think of a case where we've moved classrooms before for students that have physical disabilities. So in a wheelchair or have an athletic injury and are on crutches, they can't hike to the top of our historic building that has 3 flights of stairs. Those types of things are what our accessibility services do with student life, academic services, advising. And I love that diet is included in that too. I think that's helpful to think about.
Thank you. Moving on to another one of the questions, specifics about what are some of the services for students with autism from any of your schools?
Well, I'm talking again about my very favorite program is the NYU Connections program for autistic students. We have one-on-one meetings with accessibility specialists, usually weekly, although it depends on what works for the student. Again, we focus on the student's need. It is not a social skills training program. The group meetings are meant to build community. The individual meetings are meant to build a relationship with the accessibility specialist so that person has someone to rely on. And I've had some of my, I'll just say personally, I love the time when I work with those students because I get to know them. One student in particular is my go-to person for what's the best movie I need to be watching right now. So I mean, it's a two-way street and it's fantastic. But a big component of that program also is outreach to the NYU community about neurodiversity. And the students in the program are right now working on a logo so we can give some swag to people, like, labels for their computers and t-shirts with neurodiverse NYU. So it's not just focused on the students and their academic needs, but the welcoming nature of NYU and the fact that NYU is already neurodiverse and we welcome autistic students.
Great, thank you. And go Kathy.
For the past 20 years, folks with ASD has kind of been my passion and my career, and I'm happy to take all that experience and transition it to Sacred Heart. I will say that we don't have a structured program, but we are getting very good at connecting the students to existing programs and helping them to be more comfortable accessing the social clubs and connecting with other people. And the folks we're working with really enjoy putting themselves out there and becoming part of the community.
Great, thank you. What is the difference between a support program and an accommodation?
For us, the accommodations are put into place for any student that registers with our office and wants certain accommodations, and so we work with them on creating equal access, right? It's about removing the barriers and creating equality in the classroom. That's the way we look at accommodations. Support programs are for students that really want the support. It's not I would say it's an addition. It's not something that's about, it can be about creating equal access if that's what the student wants. It could just be study strategies. It could be connecting with tutors. So support programs, I feel like are like, so many different variations as far as what the student's looking for. And they provide added measures for the student if they want it. Whereas accommodations to us is just making sure that student has that equal access and equal opportunity.
Okay, great, thank you. So this question was, if a child has learning disabilities and their grades are C's, B's, and some A's, is college attainable? And then this question was, what about standardized testing? Are any of your schools test optional?
The pandemic has given us the best gift of allowing a lot of institutions to be test optional. And I'm coming from an institution that's been test optional for 15 years. We don't think a test on a single day is reflective of a student's abilities, and we really hone in on what is a student capable of over the course of their 4 years. So is that trajectory upward? Is it a little bit bumpy? And again, context from the application helps us fill in those gaps. I think in terms of your first question, Kelly, is a student with those types of grades accessible? I think it depends on the type of institution that they're going to apply to and the type of support that would be provided to them so they can be successful in that environment. We never want to set a student up for failure. If they are not going to get the support that they need, then we're talking about fit at that point. But I think they need to assess the type of school and then the support that they'll get at that institution.
Great, thank you.
I was going to say, so much of that could really depend on the program. I mean, I'm thinking about our School of Nursing where it is all exam-based. I mean, really, you don't have options to do projects or portfolio. Like, you need to go in and show that you understand these processes and these concepts. But then there's other programs, you know, in arts and sciences and art and theater, humanities that are much more like, I will work with students who are like, I never have to take a test. I write papers, or I do projects, or I'm a marketing major. I'm like designing a marketing, you know, so it really is whatever you're choosing to pursue, and just making sure that your it's strength-based for you.
I echo that. We're working towards universal design learning, which kind of eliminates that whole standardized testing thing. And a lot of the professors are very much open to it, but all of our nursing programs, speech language pathology, anything that has a certification or a licensure exam at the end, we need to make the shift happen there before it can happen down at the college level.
Okay, great.
I would just want to add about the grades. I mean, I think NYU is test optional starting next year. But I think in terms of the grades, that goes back to something we were talking about earlier about what is your story and how do you present yourself in a way that grades are part of the picture, but they're never all of you. Even if your grades were perfect, your grades would not be all of you. And you need to be able to present yourself fully as, you know, these are grades, these are not the reflection of everything that I am. And they never were.
And I would just add from the high school standpoint that, you know, we always use the phrase that this process is a balance between data and voice, right? And those voice pieces being, most importantly, in my opinion, the student essay, if it's available, and then your teacher letters, your counselor letters, that gives context and flavor to a lot of what we're thinking about. And I've had many students use the essay as an opportunity to share a little bit more about themselves, and not so much the way they struggled, but really how they overcame struggle and what they've learned about themselves and how prepared they are as a result of some of those challenges. And so your school counselors are absolutely available to chat through some of that as well, including essay topics. We workshop the essays, talking through, you know, teacher letters of recs and what to present. And so we're always happy to have those conversations as well. But those voice pieces, I think, you know, really shine in a process, especially if there's been some hiccups from a grade standpoint. And in the 20 years I've been doing this, you know, colleges will say, like, we want to understand, you know, what has gotten in a student's way, and we want them to help us to understand their story. So we're happy to help families to do that as well.
Okay. For students with decoding and fluency issues and struggle with foreign language, do you recommend they push through taking a language even though it may be a hit to their GPA?
Well, if there's a functional limitation from the disability or diagnosis, they should definitely come in and have a conversation with us. So at Rutgers, you're still responsible for the credits. However, you would have a course substitution of learning something about the culture as opposed to the language. So you're not waived. It's not a waiver, it's a substitution. But I would definitely, that's such a good one-on-one conversation because there's just so many nuances to each person.
Okay. The next one is, my student currently has an accommodation stating that he should not be graded based on spelling. Is this an accommodation that would or could carry over into the college environment?
I have seen that, yes. And again, as long as it is related to the disability or diagnosis, we may put an accommodation in place that says ability to use like a spell check device, or ability to use a computer with spell check software, something along those lines.
NYU is similar. We will give an accommodation for computer with spell check, but that's different than saying the student will not be graded for spelling errors. So the way we look at it, the student will be given the tools in order to identify their spelling errors, but we wouldn't give an accommodation that says the student cannot be penalized for spelling or grammar errors. Well, although we have conversations with the professors and would talk with the advisor about what might be appropriate courses for that student.
And the biggest part of that is getting used to using the tools that you might end up eventually using in the workplace. And it's perfectly appropriate to use a computer for your communication in the workplace. But professionally, you want to present yourself a certain way, and your boss wants you to be, able to have the spell check to present yourself appropriately too. So it translates very easily.
Okay, will you waive some course requirements for kids with a learning disability, specifically in that subject area? For instance, my child has dyscalculia. I said that wrong, but and is wondering about how they would manage in school with a math requirement.
So again, that's a great case-by-case conversation. We do at Rutgers offer a math course substitution depending on the program requirements, because that's also part of the ADA, that you won't modify essential requirements. And so sometimes that's a conversation with a dean about, with this program, what courses are graduation requirements. So I think we've all kind of said this at some point tonight. The answer is typically not no, never. It's case by case, and it just so many variables.
If the student's going into a computer science or a business program, generally math is going to be central to that. If the student is going to a history program, we're going to have a bigger and easier shot at convincing a program that a math substitution is appropriate. So there's two parts. There's one, does the student's disability warrant this type of a modification? And the other part is, what is the program that the student is pursuing?
Great, thank you. What are some accommodations available for hearing impaired students?
So at Rutgers, we offer many different options. There's American Sign Language interpreting, there's part captioning services. We loan to students if they were interested, like an FM system. So a professor would wear a very small microphone and it Bluetooth connects right to the student if they're, using hearing aids. I mean, there's so many options. Again, assistive technology has come so far. I mean, it's really, we could put in place, it depends also, is it a lecture hall? Is it a smaller class? Lots of different things. Oh, Zoom has live captioning now. So many possibilities.
Okay, great. I know we talked about this briefly, but could you go over some of the note-taking options or tools that some of your schools have? I know that there's a lot of different technologies out there, but maybe just if you could highlight them again. It's come up a few times.
We have Glean. I'm happy that
that's it.
Kathy used that. We do have Sonison as well, which is a similar kind of an app. We do have peer note taking. I'm not a big fan of peer note taking as an option for students. I'd rather work with them on note taking skills and using one of the apps, because I think the kind of general rule is I want you to be more independent when you leave than when you came in. So we want to put more time and effort into teaching and supporting note-taking skills with the technology than relying on peer note takers. But again, if a student really needs a peer note taker, we will do our best to find an appropriate option. And for some students in classes where they need a note taker, we will hire professional note takers. If it's a subject matter where you can't really have a peer note taker, you need somebody who can really understand the terminology. And so a wide array, that's my answer.
Okay, great.
So Rutgers uses both of those services and another service called Note Taking Express. So students would be given the ability to record the lecture, upload the recording into an account within Note Taking Express. A person, note taker, listens to the lecture, organizes the information into notes, and then sends it to the student within 24 hours. So that is really popular for lots of different reasons. And then I think somebody mentioned like smart pens and all kinds of different recording tools. Just really kind of depends on what the student's strengths are. And I always tell people, we can try this. We'll start with this. And if you like it, great. If you don't, come back and we'll try something else.
Okay. Is there a separate application for the learning differences programs at any of your schools? Or yeah, so would there be a different application process?
For our fee-based program, OnTrack at SU, there is a separate application, but there's no fee, there's no essay, no references required, anything like that. It's basically a pretty simple form that gets sent directly to me, and then I would reach out to the student. But as far as meeting one-on-one, with our learning strategists or tutors or being part of the Center for Disability Resources, no, there's no process for that.
I mean, we have an online application for the Moses Center for Student Accessibility. If that's what you're referring to, it's a 4-question, it's basically like, what do you think that you need from us? And you don't need to submit any documentation or anything. It just starts the process. So there is an application, but it's a very simple kind of pro forma.
Okay, this question goes back to where we are, everyone's doing remote. Do you think that's going to be an option for the years to come, next year, years after that?
I have no clue. I stopped trying to guess a while back. I mean, I think we're going to go mostly in person from what I know, but I'm almost afraid to jinx it by saying anything.
Right. No one has a crystal ball for this one.
Yeah, and there are lots of online programs. We have
True.
Students all over the world that attend Rutgers, specifically in a 100% online program. But like I said, I think that we're trying to keep options open for people, just depending on what the world looks like.
We very much know. We really want our students to be back in person. The benefit of being a little bit smaller and a little bit more rural is that we've had a nice bubble in the last year, but it's clear from all of our climate surveys that our students really thrive in an in-person environment where they have peer-to-peer interaction, access to faculty, access to labs and resources. And so my crystal ball, if I could make magic, would be that we'd all be back to somewhat sense of normalcy for the fall semester.
Thank you. Another question about food allergies came up. Do any of your schools restrict foods from entering classrooms in case of severe food allergies?
It could be a possibility. If someone has a severe enough allergy, we obviously want everyone to be safe. We have also at Rutgers, sometimes food allergies carry over into housing. So a person might need their own, separate living space and access to a kitchen, so there's no contamination issues. So again, sometimes these implications you don't think about until you're in that moment leading up to, and then it's like, oh, wait a minute, what about? So yes, food allergies, you know, are taken really seriously too, and just have to go through that case by case with each person.
Great. As it's been a rough year for everyone, I guess I probably know the answer to this one, but have you seen an increase in mental health needs at your schools? And then how hard is it to access help, get appointments? You know, are kids' needs being able to be met?
We've seen, and I think everybody would agree with this, a huge increase in mental health over the past year, but over the past decade. It used to be that the biggest subset of disability types were learning disabilities and ADHD, and that has been eclipsed by mental health. I think probably at many of these institutions. We have a robust counseling department. We have a regular counseling and wellness services, which includes psychiatrists, social workers, psychologists, nurse practitioners. We also have a walk-in, or now call-in, 24/7 clinic called the Wellness Exchange, and we have on-site counselors at every one of our portal and global sites. So it's pretty significant and robust counseling for students.
Okay, I know we're getting close on ending time here, but one quick question came through. Should you send your IEP into disability services beforehand, before you complete or start the application process? Is that prudent?
With
for us, it would. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
With our program, you can't make a request unless you include documentation.
Okay.
I would recommend doing it all at once, because when things get sent at different times, we have to store them in a safe, secure place, and you wouldn't want things to be confused. So I would wait and do it all at once.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. It's when you register with our Center for Disability Resources online, there's an option to upload your documentation, and it's just smoother transition, smoother process. Get it all in at once. Nothing's going to hold you back. You meet with your access counselor. They have everything, and it just makes it a smoother process.
And if families need any copies of updated documentation from us, you know, your most recent IEP or your most recent 504, just reach out and we're happy to provide that as part of your process.
Right.
So just in wrapping up, we want to just thank again all of our fabulous panelists and our moderator, Meghan. Just so people know, because we did get the question about additional schools and lists, we will be sending that out with the last of this recording. We do have a bunch of different resources. Particularly, I know whenever we do this panel every year, there's just never, we'd love to have 10 people on the panel, because it's just a wealth of information. But you really want to try to get so many different categories of students. So Think College is another fabulous resource. And then we have some other databases that we'll be sending out, as well as one other question we got was differences between high school and college. And we have some charts that we'll be sending out with that information. So thank you again for joining us, and for everyone for participating. Have a good evening.
Yep. Thank you guys. This is great. Appreciate your time and all the wonderful questions. And if we didn't get to answer them, we've taken notes so we can follow up with them. So please don't worry about that.
All the emails of everyone who participated. So thank you.
Okay.
And my heartfelt appreciation for your time as well. Thank you so much.
Great. And thank you to the library. We couldn't do it without you.
Best of luck, everybody.
Take care.